somebody's talking to Caitlin, and Caitlin Clark just said like this, Stephanie, what are you talking? She's trying to hear her out, and Caitlin's trying to explain to Stephanie White. Stephanie White with a rebuttal. I'm talking about Caitlin is trying to communicate, and now Maisha Hines-Allen is having an attitude.
For most of the Indiana Fever's recent history, the franchise operated on the margins of national relevance. That changed when Caitlin Clark arrived. Ticket sales surged, television ratings climbed, and arenas that had grown accustomed to quiet crowds were suddenly selling out. The business case for Clark was immediate and measurable. The basketball case, however, has proven far more complicated. At the center of that complication is Stephanie White, the Fever's head coach, and a sideline exchange between coach and player that was captured on video and circulated widely. The footage showed a direct, unfiltered confrontation. Hands moving, heads turning away, the kind of exchange that locker rooms are designed to contain. It did not stay contained within hours. The clip had moved through sports media, social platforms, and fan communities at a speed that routine game coverage rarely achieves. And the reaction it produced was not mixed. It was, in large part, one-directional. Viewers and analysts who watched the footage overwhelmingly directed their criticism not at Clark, but at White. The sentiment was pointed, that the coach was failing to recognize and properly utilize the talent in front of her, that her system was working against the player rather than around her, and that the front office's continued support of White represented an organizational misjudgment with real consequences. The comments, the posts, the breakdowns from independent analysts, they largely told the same story. A fan base that came to watch Caitlin Clark play basketball was increasingly watching something else. A structural friction between a player's capabilities and a coaching philosophy that did not appear designed to use them. To understand how the situation reached this point, it helps to look at what Clark actually does on a basketball court and what the Fever's coaching staff has asked her to do instead. Clark's offensive profile is unusual in professional basketball, particularly for a guard. She initiates from distance, using ball screens set near or beyond the three-point line to create driving lanes, pull-up opportunities, and kick-out passes to cutting teammates. Her range is genuine. She has made shots from distances that most players at any level would not attempt in game conditions. That range forces opposing defenses to extend their coverage, which in turn opens space near the basket. The entire structure of her game depends on tempo. When the pace is fast and the possessions come quickly, the advantages compound. When the pace slows and the offense becomes more deliberate, those advantages narrow. The Fever under White have, at various points this season, operated at a tempo that does not align with that profile. The offense has at times run deliberate, half-court sets, patient, structured possessions that prioritize spacing and ball movement over speed and improvisation. There is nothing inherently wrong with that approach. Plenty of successful teams run similar systems. But when the primary offensive engine is a player whose game is built on instinct, pace, and the ability to make split-second decisions before defenses can recover, asking that player to operate within a slow, structured system creates a tension that statistics tend to confirm. The numbers have shown this clearly enough. In stretches where the Fever have played with pace, particularly in the early portions of games, before halftime adjustments have been implemented, the offense has looked coherent and efficient. Clark in transition. Clark running off screens. Clark making quick decisions before defense is set. Those sequences have produced results. In the late game stretches, when the coaching staff has pulled the tempo back and emphasized execution over spontaneity, the efficiency has dropped. The contrast is not subtle, and it has been visible enough that it no longer requires advanced statistical framing to explain. Fans watching the games have noticed it. So have the analysts. The press briefing following one of Clark's stronger individual performances illustrated the dynamic in a different register. Clark had carried the team through a difficult stretch, producing a high-volume scoring output that kept Indiana competitive in games that might otherwise have gotten away. When reporters asked White about the performance, the response leaned heavily on collective language, the team's shared effort, the importance of every player contributing, the process of improving incrementally. Individual acknowledgement of Clark's performance was minimal. The contrast was noted, and not only by partisans. When other Fever players had solid nights, the praise from the coaching staff tended to be more direct and more personal. When Clark did something statistically significant, the framing shifted toward group credit. That pattern, repeated over enough press conferences, begins to read as something more than standard leadership messaging. There is a difference between building team culture and flattening the distinction between what different players contribute. A franchise player who is generating the majority of the team's offense, drawing defensive attention that creates opportunities for others, and single-handedly maintaining the team's competitive viability in difficult games is not simply one contributor among many. Describing her that way, repeatedly and in public, is a coaching choice, and it is one that the fan base has noticed and reacted to with considerable frustration. The rotation instability has added another layer. This far into the season, the Fever's lineup combinations have continued to shift in ways that make it difficult to establish consistent patterns. A guard inserted into one game starting lineup for defensive purposes disappears from that role in the next. Bench rotations have changed, sometimes dramatically from game to game. Coaches adjust lineups for any number of legitimate reasons. Matchups, injuries, player performance, and flexibility is not on its own a criticism. But when adjustments happen so frequently that no stable baseline is established, the effects compound. Players who depend on reading their teammates' positions and tendencies are denied the repetition that builds that familiarity. For a player like Clark, whose game involves instinctive reads, the kick-out pass to a corner shooter she expects to be in a certain spot. The leak-out to a forward she anticipates will cut at a specific moment. Unpredictability in the lineup directly undermines the execution of those plays. The structural friction between Clark's playing style and the Fever's coaching approach has now moved beyond a basketball discussion. It has become an organizational question. Sports franchises run on a combination of competitive success and commercial viability. The Fever, prior to Clark's arrival, were struggling with both. Attendance was down, national TV coverage was limited. The franchise occupied a low-visibility position in the league's commercial landscape. Clark's arrival changed that picture rapidly and substantially. The Fever became one of the most watched teams in the WNBA. Road games drew larger crowds. The team's social media presence expanded, sponsors took notice. The commercial infrastructure of the franchise was revitalized in ways that the front office could measure directly. That commercial reality creates a specific set of obligations. The asset driving the franchise's renewed visibility is a player with a well-defined skill set and a well-documented playing style. Building a roster and a coaching system around that player is not simply a basketball decision, it is a business decision. When the coaching approach appears to work against the player's strengths rather than with them, the implications extend beyond the win-loss record. They affect the product that fans are paying to watch, the experience that has driven the franchise's commercial recovery, and the long-term sustainability of the investment the organization has made. The front office has, at least publicly, continued to support White's position. That stance is consistent with how front offices typically manage visible coaching controversies, publicly backing the coach while conducting more substantive internal evaluations. Whether those internal evaluations are resulting in pressure on White to adjust her approach, or whether they are producing genuine consideration of a coaching change, is not publicly known. What is known is that the situation has become visible enough that doing nothing is itself a choice with consequences. The fan base response to the sideline footage has been significant enough to constitute a meaningful signal. It was not simply an expression of frustration by a vocal minority. The volume and consistency of the criticism, directed specifically at White's coaching rather than at Clark's behavior, reflected a widely shared view among the people who follow this team closely. That segment includes the ticket buyers, the TV viewers, and the subscribers to the various platforms where the Fever's content generates revenue. Their sustained engagement is part of what made the franchise's commercial recovery possible. Their sustained frustration is a variable the organization has to weigh. There is a version of this situation that resolves without a dramatic rupture. White adjusts the offensive system to make better use of Clark's strengths. The rotation stabilizes. The public framing of Clark's contributions becomes more direct. The team performs well enough that the underlying tensions recede. That path is available. It requires a significant change in how the coaching staff has been operating, but it does not require a personnel change. There is also a version in which the tensions continue to compound. The system does not adjust. The press conferences continue to flatten Clark's individual contributions into collective language. The rotation instability persists. The on-court performance reflects those frictions. And the front office eventually faces a decision that is harder to defer, whether the coaching philosophy or the player is more central to the franchise's future. The sideline footage made that question public in a way that internal discussions could not. It put a visible face on something that had been legible in the statistics and the press conference transcripts for weeks. The exchange between Clark and White was not a random emotional event. It was the surface expression of a structural incompatibility that had been accumulating over time.